I feel like when they get out of school, they're going to be required to use these tools 1, 2, 3 years out. So why would we prevent them from learning these things? These kids at all levels, if you teach it properly, they will learn how to be responsible in their use. If you tell them no, they're just going to find ways to do it without telling you they did it. Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Show, the podcast that helps your business grow smarter by making AI approachable and actionable. My name is Paul Roetzer. I'm the founder and CEO of Marketing AI Institute, and I'm your host. Each week, I'm joined by my co-host and Marketing AI Institute Chief Content Officer, Mike Kaput, as we break down all the AI news that matters and give you insights and perspectives that you can use to advance your company and your career. Join us as we accelerate AI literacy for all. Welcome to episode 111 of the Artificial Intelligence Show. I am your host, Paul Roetzer, along with my co-host, Mike Kaput, who is, where are you today, Mike?
I'm in beautiful Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Nice. Mike's in town for a talk. So he's traveling. I'm actually catching a flight right after this as well. I will be out west this week. So yeah, Mike and I are on the road this week, but we have a lot to talk about before we worry about any of that. So um, there's some big topics. We got Grok-2 and its unfiltered image generation capabilities. We have insights from Demis Hassabis of Google DeepMind in a new podcast episode. We're going to talk about AI in schools. There's a lot to go through. So first, I want to say this episode is brought to us by the Marketing AI Conference, or MACON. The 5th annual MACON event is coming up September 10th to the 12th. We've been talking about this a lot on the podcast lately. Now, this is the event I started back in 2019 as part of Marketing AI Institute. So we're in our 5th year. It is the biggest one yet. There's a total of 69 sessions, 33 breakouts, 10 main stage general sessions and keynotes, 16 AI tech demos. We just announced 2 new main stage talks that I'm extremely excited about. The first is with Andrew Mason, the CEO and founder of Descript, which is a platform that we use for the podcast. We love Descript. It's an essential part of our tech stack for not only the platform, but all the webinars we do for all the video and audio. So that session is going to be AI as your underlord, the future of storytelling with AI creative assistance. And then we also announced another main stage session titled AI First, Future Proof Your Business and Brand. This one, anyone who's been listening to the podcast for a while will appreciate. This is actually with Adam Brotman, the former EVP and Chief Digital Officer for Starbucks, and Andy Sack, venture capitalist and former advisor to Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. Now, why would you know Adam and Andy's names? Well, back on episode 86, when we sort of broke the story about Sam Altman's quote about marketing in the future of AGI, where Sam said that AGI will mean that 95% of what marketers use agencies, strategists, and creative professionals for today will easily, nearly instantly, and at almost no cost be handled by the AI. Well, that quote came from Adam and Andy's book, AI First, and an interview they had done with him in October of 2023. So this session at MACON is going to be sort of a behind the scenes of not only that interview with Sam, but after they talked to Sam, they interviewed Reid Hoffman, Bill Gates, Mustafa Solomon, Sal Khan, all about AI and transformation in marketing and business. And so this session is going to be a fireside chat with Adam and Andy, exploring everything they learned along this journey, interviewing some of these AI leaders. So MACON, again, it's coming up fast. Check it out. It's at macon.ai. That's MAICON.ai. You can use pod 200 to get $200 off any pass you want. And so again, check it out. The agenda is up there. More than 69 sessions. I'm going to have trouble picking which ones to go to. There's just so many incredible speakers. So macon.ai. All right, Mike, Grok-2. Let's start with Grok-2.
Yeah, let's dive into the madness right away. So Elon Musk's AI company, XAI, they've just rolled out an early preview of Grok-2 and the Grok-2 Mini AI models. Now, XAI says that an early version of Grok-2 was actually able to outperform both Claude 3.5 Sonnet and GPT-4 Turbo on the lmsys.org chatbot leaderboard. But the improvements in the model, in its reasoning, its code, its language capabilities, these are not what have everyone talking, because that's been overshadowed a bit by the model being linked now to an image generation model called Flux, which we talked about last week. This allows users on X to create AI generated images. Now, what's raising eyebrows here and getting a lot of not so positive attention is that there apparently aren't that many safeguards, if any, in Grok's image generation capabilities right now. Grok does not seem to be refusing any type of prompts involving real people. It's not adding any type of watermark to its output. And to put it lightly, this has led users to create some very controversial content on one of the largest communications platforms in the world. So there's been a ton of threads being shared of images of political figures in compromising situations. And while Grok claims to have certain limitations on like pornographic or excessively violent imagery, the rules, according to The Verge, appear very inconsistent in practice. So there's basically a flood of a ton of crazy AI generated imagery that is anywhere from really funny to very profane and very offensive. Elon Musk, known for his stance on freedom of speech, defended the release, calling it a quote, intermediate step for people to have some fun while XAI develops its own image generation system. Now, Paul, I've seen some of the, let's call these questionable image results that people are creating. Am I wrong in saying this seems just like a recipe for disaster?
Yeah, but it's what Musk does. He pushes the boundaries and invites lawsuits, and I think it keeps him entertained and motivated to do what he's doing. I don't know. It is shocking how good it is at reproducing people and
Mm.
characters. Like it'll do. My first test was like Disney characters as an experiment, and it nailed. I did Mickey Mouse and Goofy riding in a Tesla, and it was as though Disney created it. So I think it's important to take a quick step back on XAI and Grok. So we have talked about them on the show before, but as a reminder, uh, Elon Musk started OpenAI with Sam Altman and Greg Brockman and others as a counterbalance to Google's AI efforts and their acquisition of DeepMind, which we're going to talk about next in the next topic, which Musk was an investor in. So Elon Musk had invested in Google or in DeepMind before it was Google DeepMind to stay close to the frontier because he was worried about the risk to humanity if we achieved AGI. He then exited OpenAI in 2019 after trying to roll OpenAI into Tesla and losing a power struggle with Sam Altman. So on episode 71 of this podcast, November 7th, 2023, so just 10 months ago, they announced they didn't announce it on our podcast, but we covered the announcement on our podcast that he announced Grok, an AI agent designed to answer any question conversationally. In their announcement about XAI, uh, they said Grok is designed to answer questions with a bit of wit and has a rebellious streak, so please don't use it if you hate humor. A unique and fundamental advantage of Grok is that it has real time knowledge of the world via the X platform. It also can answer spicy questions that are rejected by most other AI systems. So, from the beginning, they set this precedent that this thing's going to do some stuff that the other ones won't by design. The real time access to Twitter slash X was, the thing that was really differentiating them. Grok is a popular term. We talked about this on the time at the podcast among science fiction fans that was coined in Robert Heinlein's classic sci-fi novel, A Stranger in a Strange Land. Grok basically means to develop a very deep understanding of something. Um, then in May 26th, 2024, so just a few months back, they announced $6 billion Series B round funding at a rumored valuation of $24 billion. So what's that? 7, 8 months after its founding, it was valued at $24 billion. It was founded, I guess, in July 2023. They released Grok 1 in November 2023. And then now we have Grok 2. Um, so the interesting thing was we talked about Flux last week, as you said, this image generation tool, and we were like, well, but it's kind of hard to use. Well, it's not hard to use anymore because now it's in Grok. So if you're paying your whatever the premium license is on X, $20 or something, you can now do it. Um, it will create anything. Like I asked for images of Taylor Swift and Elon Musk together, Disney, Pixar, other celebrities, politicians. It'll do it all. And it does it in near photorealism for people. And when you ask for Disney and Pixar, it is eerily similar, if not an exact replica of the characters. So now the interesting thing here is, as you mentioned, sort of pushing the limits of free speech. Some other context. Now, it's not like it's only doing this for Disney. It can do it for anything. I asked for like Transformers, like Optimus Prime meets a Tesla bot and things like that. And it does all that. But Disney in particular, who is notoriously aggressive in protecting its copyrights and trademarks, Elon and Bob Iger have a very recent history together. So if you'll recall, back in November of last year, at the New York Times Deal Book Summit, Disney had pulled their ads from X. So Disney was a big advertiser on X, and Elon was not happy about this. And at the time, Elon had retweeted something that was viewed by many as being anti-Semitic, and that led to Disney and a bunch of other brands yanking their advertising. Well, Elon, in a fireside chat with Andrew Ross Sorkin, was asked about this, to which Elon, to everyone's shock in the audience, said, if somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go F yourself. Go F yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Then he appeared to directly call out Disney CEO Bob Iger by adding, "Hey, Bob, if you're in the audience, that's how I feel." Bob was at the event. So Elon was trying to very purposely call out the Disney CEO for yanking advertising. Tesla then yanked Disney Plus from their cars. So in the back of a Tesla, you can watch like Netflix and Disney Plus and other shows, YouTube. They took Disney Plus out. So, Elon's known to hold a bit of a grudge. So it's not like this is just being done to Disney, but it sure almost feels like he's just baiting Disney to sue him.
Mhm.
Like, just go ahead. And I'm sure it's coming. Like, they can't allow this to happen. So I don't know where this is going to go, but it does, it's worth watching. We actually have a main stage session at MACON about IP and generative AI. So this is going to be a hot topic at MACON because you're dealing with copyright infringement issues here with characters from Disney, Pixar, and other creators, trademark violations, right of publicity violations for celebrities, defamation, misrepresentation. All of these are fair game when you put a system like this out there. And Elon is one of the few people who's got the money and the personality to sort of take this kind of stuff on in the name of quote unquote free speech in Elon's terms. So it's gonna be interesting to watch, but it is quite good, and it will generate whatever you want it to.
It should do wonders to raise awareness of people of what these tools are capable of in good and bad ways, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I will say also, I've played around with Grok-2 just as a language model,
Mhm.
and it is way better. Like,
Yeah.
it's Grok-2 Mini is the one that I have access to as a paid user of X, which is the only reason I'm paying to have X is, it is to be able to, test these tools. I don't know what else you would pay for, since the blue check mark is sort of not worth anything these days. So it is quite good. I mean, I believe supposed to be on par with like a GPT 3.5 range, and it does seem to be there in my limited testing.
Okay, so another big topic we are seeing this week is that after a 2-year hiatus, Google DeepMind is back with its hit podcast called Google DeepMind, the podcast. And this was previously hosted by Professor Hannah Fry and still is. The previous 2 seasons of the podcast covered a very wide range of fundamental topics in AI, including looking behind the scenes at the technology that actually powers the tools and models and how it's being used to better business and society. Well, now the podcast is back. They're regularly releasing new episodes, including an initial episode where Fry interviews Google DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis. And Paul, I know you've been following this series for a while. I think interestingly, this is the first season of the podcast to launch since the debut of ChatGPT nearly 2 years ago. Like, What's important to know about this effort, this show, and this latest season, in your opinion?
First, Hannah Fry, the host, is amazing. So she has a book called Hello World: Being Human in the Age of Algorithms, which I would recommend to everyone. I think that came out around 2021, 2022. I read it a while ago. But she's a brilliant author, professor, mathematician, and she does an incredible job with the interviews. I would suggest listening to the first two seasons. I think they're each about 7 or 8 episodes. And so you can binge them, and they're fantastic. You just learn a ton about the inner workings of DeepMind. But season 3 started off with an interview with Demis, and you can go back to season 2, and it's fascinating to sort of benchmark where he thought AI was in season
Mm,
2, a couple of years ago, and where we think we are today. So I would start off with Demis Hassabis. So we talk about Demis a lot on this show. If you're a regular listener to the show, it's a name familiar to you. But having done hundreds of keynotes in the last few years on AI, and in almost every one of them using Demis's definition of AI, and then asking how many people in the room are familiar with Demis Hassabis,
mm,
it is rare in a room of hundreds of people to get more than one or two hands to go up.
yeah, awesome.
So Demis is extremely well known within the AI world, certainly within technology. But when you get outside into the business world, into the marketing world, it's just not a name people know, and I think, it should be. So what I'll often say is I'll use his definition. So the definition Demis gives of AI, and this goes back to like a Rolling Stone article in like 2016, 17 is when I first saw it. AI is the science of making machines smart. And I always love that definition because of its simplicity. And what I tell people is like replace machines with software, and it actually makes a ton of sense that the software we use to do our jobs, whether it's marketing or HR or finance or legal or whatever it is, the software you use is getting smarter. It's developing the ability to think, to create, to understand, to reason, to plan. And software before didn't do those things. So I like to use his definition because I think it's extremely approachable and it makes sense to a lot of people. And then I'll often say, like, Demis is going to be one of the most important people of our generation, if not all of human history. And then when you start to talk about the work he has done, like with AlphaGo and AlphaFold, and just everything they're doing at DeepMind, it's really important people understand who Demis is and follow along. So he was a child chess prodigy. He's 48, I believe. I think he was 1976. He was born chess prodigy, a renowned video game designer and developer by the age of 17, co-founded DeepMind in 2010, PhD in cognitive neuroscience with a focus on imagination and memory. So like he's really focused on understanding the human mind, but then
Mm,
a lot of their research was through gameplay. And so early it was Atari games and then into the game of Go. And so their team, after they were acquired in 2014 by Google, their team built AlphaGo that defeated the world champion in Lee Sedol in 2016. AlphaFold predicts the structure of nearly all known proteins. They open source that research. They just recently came out with AlphaFold 3 that'll accelerate like drug discovery, for example. So they do incredible work. So anytime Demis does a podcast, I listen to it. I think I've listened to basically every podcast he's ever done. So I think everyone should go listen to the episode. I'm just going to highlight maybe like 5 or 6 key topics that were discussed, but it's worth going and listening to the full thing. So the title of the podcast episode, if I'm not mistaken, is something like "Unreasonably Effective,"
mhm,
and that starts out early in the episode where they talk about large language models being unreasonably effective, which is how Demis described them. So when Professor Fry asked about that, he said somehow these systems, if you give them enough data, they do seem to learn and generalize from examples, not just rote memorization, but actually somewhat understand what they're processing. And it's sort of a little bit unreasonably effective in the sense that I don't think anyone would have thought it would work as well as it has, say, 5 years ago. So for me, like that's a really interesting one because again, he is at the forefront and he's saying 5 years ago, we wouldn't have guessed these models would be doing what they're doing.
mm,
And so what we're always trying to do on the show is like capture the moment, like where are we and where do we think we're going to go? But I think that excerpt is representative of the fact that even the people in the at the leading edge of this aren't really clear. And I remember like in Genius Makers by Cade Metz, one of my favorite books on AI, he told the story of when DeepMind achieved defeating the world champion of Go, that there were other labs working on it. And I think at the time, even like Jan LeCun at Meta thought they were crazy, that it wasn't something that would be achievable in the near term. And then like 6 months later, they announced that they had done it. So you can't ever feel like any one AI expert knows what's going to happen because they don't agree on this stuff. And oftentimes they underestimate or overestimate what's going to happen. The other one I wanted to touch on is underhyped versus overhyped. So she asked, do you think that where we are right now, how things are at this moment, is overhyped or underhyped? Or is it just hyped perhaps in the wrong direction? To which Demis responded, yeah, I think it's more the latter. So I would say that in the near term, it's hyped too much. I think people are claiming it can do all sorts of things it can't. There's all sorts of startups and VC money chasing crazy ideas that are just not ready. On the other hand, I think it's still underhyped. I think it's underhyped or perhaps underappreciated even now. What's going to happen when we get to AGI and post AGI? Now, keep in mind here, he's not saying if that he believes it is a when, as does Sam Altman, as does many of the others. So I still don't feel like people have quite understood how enormous that's going to be, and therefore the responsibility of that. So it's both really, I think it's a little bit overhyped in the near term and at the moment. Um, Another one I liked was she asked about, well, how do you evaluate all these AI startups? Like, how do you know what's real? And this is something, Mike, you and I talk to companies about a lot, where it's like, how do we trust these vendors? And so he said, I think you need to look at obviously the technical due diligence, have some understanding of the technology and the latest sort of trends. I think also look at perhaps the background of the people. How technical are they? Have they just arrived in AI like last year from somewhere else? I don't know. Were they doing crypto last year? These might be clues that perhaps they're jumping on the bandwagon. And it doesn't mean to say they can't come up with good ideas like this. Um, but it's more like lottery ticket, shall we say, meaning they might get lucky and switch from crypto to this, but they need to have been there for a while. She did ask him about Gemini and how it's different from other models. He basically talked about how they've built it multimodal from the ground up, so it has a better understanding of the world around it. And again, multimodal being not just text input, but image and video and audio and code. And then he also talked about their big innovation in memory, which they were the first to market with the million context, and now it's 2 million. And they've talked about 10 million context being how much content you can give it. So, whether it's videos or books or whatever it may be. And then he did say he basically felt like it was Gemini, ChatGPT, and Anthropic Claude are the three main models to, pay attention to. And he said the other ones like Meta, Mistral are doing interesting things, but it's pretty much a three-horse race at this point.
Mm,
She did ask him about open source. So we talk a lot about that. We'll talk about SB 1047 again later in this episode. And he said they're huge proponents of it. Like they've been big believers of it. They've open sourced AlphaFold, their AlphaGo research. But he did say it's okay to do it now because the systems aren't that powerful. Quote, but in 2, 3, 4 years' time, especially when you start getting agent like systems and agentic behaviors, then if something's misused by someone or perhaps even a rogue nation, that could cause serious harm. So then I think I don't have a solution for that, but as a community we need to think about what does that mean for open source. And then this is what he proposed: perhaps the frontier models need to have more checks on them, and then only after they've been out for a year or two, then they can be open sourced. And he did say that's basically what they're doing with their Gemma model. So Gemma is their open source model. And he pretty much said, like, we're giving you a year or two old technology. We're giving you the smaller version that's basically like a year old. It's not our frontier model. And the
mhm,
frontier models, we need to have a bigger focus. And then two other thoughts here. So he talked about the role of planning and agents. So this is a recurring topic for us. So he said they still can't do actions in the world for you. They're very much like passive Q&A systems. I think that agentic is the next era. These sort of more agent-based systems, we would call them, have these agent-like behaviors where they can do things for you. And then he said, and this is where my biggest argument is why I think in the end Google still has the advantage. I mean,
mhm,
obviously OpenAI is doing insane stuff, Anthropic's doing insane stuff, but I always go back to AlphaGo as the thing that no one else has nor has built. And so he says, this agent area is what we're expert in. That's what we use to build with all of our game agents, including AlphaGo. and all the other things we've talked about in the past. So a lot of what we're doing is marrying that work together. So the large language models with their reinforcement learning systems like AlphaGo. So the next generation of systems you think of as combining AlphaGo with Gemini. So I'm going to say one other part. I'm going to, Mike, actually read an excerpt from our book from
Yeah.
2022 because I think this sets the stage for the significance of AlphaGo, but it also is a prelude to some of the other things we're going to talk about a little later in this episode. So in our book, we kind of talked about this move 37, this famous move that happened during the 2016 match with Lee Sedol. And then we talked about the relation of that move and what this AlphaGo system was able to do, and the impact it may have on creativity and planning and knowledge work. So I'm just going to read this quick excerpt from our book. So it says this debate over machine creativity was brought to life in Game Two of the AlphaGo versus Go World Champion Lee Sedol match in 2016. Move 37, as it became known, saw the DeepMind machine place a stone on the Go board in a non traditional spot that had human Go experts baffled. Michael Redman, a commenter on the live English broadcast and a top Go player himself, said at the time, quote, "I wasn't expecting that. I don't really know if it's good or bad. It's a very strange move." Sedol, who had already lost game one to the machine, was in disbelief. He stared at the board for a moment, sat back in his chair, and spent the next 12 minutes assessing his options before finally making his next move. Sedol never recovered. He would lose game two, and AlphaGo would go on to win the best of five series 4-1. The DeepMind team had trained AlphaGo, and this is the real important stuff here. The DeepMind team had trained AlphaGo using deep learning, specifically a type called reinforcement learning, in which AlphaGo learned to discover new strategies by playing millions of games of Go against versions of itself. In addition, AlphaGo learned the ancient game of Go by studying millions of moves made by top human Go players. Cade Metz, who I mentioned earlier, an author and technology correspondent with the New York Times, was in Seoul, South Korea, covering the match for Wired magazine. He spoke with DeepMind's David Silver, the lead researcher on the AlphaGo project, about Move 37. Metz summarized what happened in this way. Now, as I'm reading this, think about the future of these models and their ability to learn and to plan and to reason. So AlphaGo learns from human moves, and then it learns from moves made when it plays itself. It understands how humans play, but it can also look beyond how humans play to an entirely different level of the game. This is what happened with Move 37. AlphaGo had calculated that there was a 1 in 10,000 chance that a human would make that move. But when it drew on all the knowledge it had accumulated by playing itself so many times and looked ahead to the future of the game, it decided to make the move anyway. And the move was genius. In AlphaGo the movie, which everyone should watch, it's free on YouTube, Silver said of Move 37 that AlphaGo went, quote, went beyond its human guide and it came up with something new and creative and different. But in the documentary, Silver also made the point that this is not human versus machine, rather human plus machine. Quote, AlphaGo is human created, and I think that's the ultimate sign of human ingenuity and cleverness. Everything that AlphaGo does, it does because a human has either created the data that it learns from, created the learning algorithm that learns from that data, or created the data that it learns from, or created the data that it learns from, created the learning algorithm that learns from the data, or oh, a second. I think I pasted that one in there twice. Basically, learns from the data or created the data that it learns from. All these things have come from humans. So really, this is a human endeavor. And then in the final excerpt here, Sedol would later say, I thought AlphaGo was based on probability calculation and that it was merely a machine. But when I saw this move, I changed my mind. Surely AlphaGo is creative. This move was really creative and beautiful. So in a later topic, rapid fire, we're going to talk about this idea of can large language models create new ideas and innovate? And I want you to remember this excerpt when we get into that conversation.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, that's why we are covering this and why it's so important, as we say so often, to follow these leading voices in AI. I mean, there's relatively few people like Demis driving this type of innovation, and he's been here since the beginning. So hearing what he has to say is not just an exercise in listening to someone making, a public or PR appearance, but you can really get clues to what the future holds, it sounds like.
Yeah, and again, it's one perspective, but for me, Demis has always been sort of the leading perspective. So, while we listen to and comment on all these other AI leaders, I've just always found him to be like the most authentic, and someone who I felt was truly just pursuing knowledge and intelligence and answers. And I don't feel like he's ever there promoting anything. Like I just he's a researcher who became a CEO, but I think at his core, he's still just trying to find answers to things.
Yeah. All right. So our third big topic this week is it is that time of year again. In the US, another academic year is getting underway, and kids, young adults are all headed back to school. Now, as they do, we're really expecting AI usage in school to again be a hot topic because schools still appear to be grappling with how to handle AI's disruption to classwork, homework, and traditional methods of evaluating students. It still seems some schools are fearful of the technology. Many don't fully understand it, though some are embracing it to enrich the learning experience. Now, the process, however, unfortunately, is a bit messy. I mean, while AI is rapidly improving and becoming ubiquitous in students' lives and the lives of their parents, teachers, administrators, it's also creating a bunch of challenges that schools appear to need to solve relatively quickly, especially given the pace of innovation we've been discussing in these topics. So, Paul, you had recently posted about this topic on LinkedIn, saying your kids who are 11 and 12 quote, omnipresent AI will be their reality. Students today in middle school, high school, and college will never know a professional world in which AI isn't infused into everything they do, regardless of the career path they choose. What does this mean for schools? And what's kind of your take on where schools are at with AI, where they need to be going, and the future of all this in education?
Yeah, so this was kind of triggered by a couple of things. So one, our friend David Meerman Scott had shared an article that he had recently written, and he tagged me on Twitter, and it got kind of me thinking about this time of year last year. I think we did an episode on AI policies in schools,
Mhm.
and I had put on LinkedIn at that time asking if parents had gotten AI policies from their schools yet. And so I feel like last school year, 23 to 24, was this very messy period where schools all of a sudden felt like they had to do something. And generally, it seemed as though most schools defaulted to this approach of let the teachers decide individually what they do in their classrooms and whether or not they teach it. But then there was no preparation, again, broadly speaking, to give teachers the knowledge they needed to make that decision. It was just kind of like, hey, we have to say something. So it's plagiarism if they use ChatGPT to write something. And
Yeah.
otherwise, it's up to teachers if they want to do this. So I started thinking this kind of Saturday morning. I think I wrote this, or Saturday or Sunday morning. And like my kids don't start back for like 3 more weeks, but I know other kids are starting back to school already. So I thought, wow, okay, we're back in this situation again. So here we are a year later. Maybe policies have advanced. Maybe there's been some education and training provided to teachers at different levels. I mean, certainly there's a ton of people in my network, like on LinkedIn and in our institute community, who are professors, who are academics, who are doing incredible things. So this is by no means meant to be a universal statement about how what's happening. There
Mm.
are individual teachers, professors, and academic leaders who are very proactively trying to solve this. But broadly speaking, as a parent of 2 middle school children, and my children go to a wonderful school, they're not taught this stuff. And there's this fine line I have to walk as a parent who understands deeply what's possible of what do I teach my kids and when? How do I empower them to use these tools? And so I've been very selective in doing it, but I've found in recent months, especially over this summer, I've been way more proactive in integrating AI tools into their learning. And so not just their learning, but just their overall experiences. Like my kids have incredible imaginations. It's still amazing to me like how their minds work, how they invent characters and stories and games and things like this. And so I've started using these tools to assist them. So like my son was trying to create like names for Pokemon characters. And so he had these ideas of what this Pokemon would do. And so we used ChatGPT and like, okay, what are some other names we could come up with? And then be like, okay, what could this character look like? And we would go in and do things like that. I've taught them how to use perplexity, but how to use it where they're evaluating and verifying the sources of the information. So, I mean, my daughter could tell you this over and over again. Like, every time she comes to me with something, it's like, Dad, I vetted the sources. Here's where they're from. Like, I double checked it, and so like they know at this age to already do this. And so my whole point of this post on LinkedIn was like, as parents, we have an obligation to prepare our kids for the future, whether their schools are ready to do it or not. It is more likely than not your school that your kids go to, whether it's middle school, high school, maybe into college, isn't going to be overly proactive. They are more likely to say it is cheating or plagiarism or that they're not allowed to use these tools. And I feel like that's just the wrong approach. I feel like when they get out of school or when my kids go to high school or when they go on to college, they're going to be required to use these tools 1, 2, 3 years out. So why would we prevent them from learning these things? And so like I put in the post, like what I tell my kids all the time is these tools are never a replacement for your own imagination, creativity, or critical thinking. And so when they use them, they will actually come back to me and say, well, here's what I did first, and then I used it to do this. So like
Yeah.
they get it and they're 11 and 12. Like these kids at all levels, if you teach it properly, they will learn how to be responsible in their use. If you tell them no, they're just going to find ways to do it without telling you they did it. And so I feel like, as a parent, it's just being proactive, accepting that your children are going to use these tools. These tools are going to be embedded into the social platforms they have access to or eventually have access to, whether it's an Instagram or a Snapchat or a WhatsApp or like whatever these kids are using these days. The tools are going to be there anyway.
Yeah.
Rock, if they're on Twitter, like so I just feel like as parents, we need to be, responsible for being proactive and integrating it into their lives. And then ideally academics, if you're involved at any level, to again, raise your hand and be the one that says like, okay, let's get our teachers educated. And that was kind of the plea I made in the post is AI literacy for teachers, like teach the teachers. If we're going to put this responsibility on teachers at all levels to be the ones to make these decisions, at least give them the knowledge of what it is they're deciding. So yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like a soapbox thing, but I mean, I thank you to everyone who commented on it. The post
Yeah.
has like almost 10,000 impressions and dozens of incredible comments. So, I appreciate all that and go in and look at the comments. There's comments from educators, there's comments from parents. I think it's just an important issue that we talk about. And that's why we wanted to make sure we touched on it on this podcast.
Might be a worthwhile experiment or follow up is just grab all the comments, drop them into Chat GPT and pull out some themes and
Yeah.
sentiment. Be curious to see that.
Yeah, it's a good thought. And again, we'll probably come back to this throughout the year, and
Mm.
I don't know, maybe at some point we do a special episode, like deep dive on this because I just think it's so relevant to all of us. We all have kids or grandkids or nieces and nephews or whatever it is. And this is just a real issue that's going to affect everyone in society. So yeah, it's an important one.
Yeah, I'd probably argue most educational outfits or organizations, you're essentially at the front lines of this stuff because there's no delay in adopting the technology from your board or your executives or a long rollout in the enterprise. It's like you can use these tools immediately to very significantly disrupt how education works.
Yeah, and I'll again make the plea I've made before. Like the government's got to get involved here. We need
Mm.
more funding for AI education. If I was a big tech, if I was a Google, Microsoft, one of those players, I would be seriously thinking about earmarking funding to accelerate this stuff across, different countries. Because I just feel like we're building these tools. We have to prepare people for the future with them, and just need more. We need bigger picture thinking. I think overall about how to accelerate AI literacy.
All right, let's dive into some rapid fire topics. First up is another really interesting, important, kind of deep topic. Can large language models, the LLMs, come up with new ideas and innovate? That's a question we've been kind of increasingly thinking about as we see AI with new capabilities and increased reasoning power coming out. Because in theory, LLMs can only make predictions and create outputs based on their training data, which largely comes from existing human knowledge and content, like we talked about in the case of Google. So many researchers, among them Jan LeCun at Meta, believe that AI is essentially incapable of original thoughts or ideas. But others, like researcher Eric Brynjolfsson, we've talked about multiple times on this podcast, note that this opinion may actually misunderstand the nature of a lot of innovation. Brynjolfsson recently posted, for instance, the following about this topic, saying, quote, a lot of people say that LLMs merely recombine existing content and don't create anything truly new, but that misunderstands the nature of innovation. Most innovation is recombinant innovation, and the scope for additional recombinations is staggering. Paul, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this topic and kind of wrote out some things about it. Like, could you walk us through the nuance here? Can AI innovate? Can't it?
Yeah, so I've said before, just a little background context here. Like one of the ways that I stay like real time with what's happening in AI is notifications on X. So I get notifications from both Jan LeCun and Eric Brynjolfsson, the economist. And so when those two were talking with each other, I saw this thread. And so this was like Friday morning, I think. And so that thread is that what then inspired me to go and like put these thoughts on LinkedIn. So that's kind of
Mm,
how a lot of this stuff happens. So I'll read the couple last paragraphs from the post because I think it sort of summarizes it. And again, this was thanks to everyone who commented on this one. There was some great comments on the LinkedIn post related to this one. Um, so I said I think what sometimes gets lost in the technical part of the debate is whether or not it matters in the business world if AI is truly coming up with new ideas. Most innovation in business is just connecting dots from existing information and knowledge that are seemingly unrelated and figuring out how to build products and brands around them. My experience with large language models as brainstorming partners is that they are often far more capable than many senior strategists I've worked with in my career, except you, Mike. Like, yeah.
oh, it's smarter than me. I
For
already know.
people who don't know, Mike and I have worked together now for 13 years, I think.
Yeah.
So, and Mike was one of the best strategists I've worked with. So, um, okay, but these models are only getting smarter. So while we may need additional technical breakthroughs before AI can discover or invent new things, as Jan LeCun would sort of propose, um, that weren't in the training data, my call to people was don't wait for that data. Leverage the power of large language models to drive innovation in your business because they are more than capable of that now. So if you are not using these things as a strategist, as a planning partner,
Mm.
do it. Like I do it all the time. It is one of the primary use cases for me as a business leader, as a strategist. I always use them as a sounding board when I'm developing ideas. Even if I think I'm like locked in and I've got it, I
Mm.
will vet that idea with the model. And I almost always start with my own ideas, my own kind of outlines for things. And then I'll just kind of bounce it around and I will do it in Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude. Like I will use all three of them with the same prompts and I'll just kind of collect those ideas and then use that to develop and drive my own innovation and new ideas.
It's funny you mentioned that because it recently, especially with ChatGPT voice mode, I've just been putting in AirPods and having it talk me through and talking it through, say, a presentation I'm
Yep.
creating, document I'm writing. You're almost like pair programming, but for knowledge work, for strategy. And it's remarkable.
And to your point, like, even if it's only on par with, like, a good strategist, like,
Right.
let's say, which is not, but, like, I think it's above that, but let's say that's all it was, it's on call for you 24/7. Like, if you're on you're walking, you're in the car, like, laying in bed, like, whatever you're doing, you
Right.
can have a conversation with a good to great strategist about anything you're working on. That alone is worth the $20 a month. Like, again,
Right.
we go back to this, like, is it worth the money? I'm like, yeah, it's worth the $20 for each of them to
Yep.
just have that alone as a use case.
All right. Another big topic we're tracking is that Google has struck a deal with Character AI, which is a startup known for its AI avatar technology. So, this move includes a licensing agreement and the acquisition of some top talent from Character AI. Now, Character AI, for anyone who's totally unfamiliar, was founded in 2022. It made a huge name for itself, allowing users to create AI avatars. It's extremely popular. The company saw rapid growth. It reached a valuation of $1 billion in March 2023. They're now, however, making a strategic shift because they're now going to license their technology to Google. And Character AI's founding team, which are significant names you're about to hear, Noam Shazir and Daniel De Freitas, along with some members of the research team, are also joining Google. Now, Shazir was previously an engineer at Google, heavily involved in some of the earlier research, fundamental research on AI that made today's generative AI possible. He'll be rejoining the company as part of the DeepMind team. And basically, this marks a big change in how Character is approaching the market. They used to be building their own models, but now they're going to leverage pre trained models and focus on post training capabilities. Now, kind of what nobody has really confirmed here is whether this deal is considered an acquisition. Sources close to the agreement have stated that it's not an acquisition or an acqui-hire, though certainly does sound like one. So, Paul, I think what would be important here is to kind of maybe just unpack what character AI means being a part of Google essentially now. What does it kind of also mean for consumer behavior?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the big things is the distribution. So, as Google and OpenAI, and I believe OpenAI was trying to, get Character AI too. I think they're not. Everybody was trying to get at them, basically. Um, it's we always talk about this idea of distribution. So, Demis talked about this in the podcast. This idea that if you're just a research lab, you don't have products to test your models with. Like you don't have that distribution where now the new Pixel phone has Gemini baked into it. So they have like this massive distribution. How many, Gemini phones there are, whatever. But like let's say it's a billion users. They can now push models out to a billion people. And so character is potentially like a whole nother generation of hundreds of millions of users. So Bill Wall-Sadu, who's a former Googler and host of the TED AI show and also a scout for Andreessen Horowitz, he tweeted that I thought was really smart. He tweeted some key points here. So he said, first, and we'll put this the link to this tweet in the show notes. He said, Character AI is now number 4 on the iOS App Store in entertainment and number 28 overall. Over half its users are Gen Z, 18 to 24. This is mind boggling to me, averaging 2 hours daily on the app.
That's
So
wild.
what that means is like these people are spending all this time interacting with AI characters, not real people. As these characters and the tweet continues. Number 2, as these characters and role playing experiences become multimodal, audio, video, screen share, they'll become serious substitutes to time spent on Netflix and Discord. Um, Number 3, in response, movie and TV properties will likely create their own characters' experiences on these platforms to continue engaging with their audience. So now you're starting to think about like the impact on brands. It's like, oh
Mhm.
wow, we gotta be in this world basically. Um, then number 4, what do you think the experience of Project Astra, which is DeepMind and Google, or GPT-4 plus advanced voice vision will bring to creative experiences? 5, they'll surely be helpful real world assistants, but I think we're on the cusp of experiences that go far beyond AI. WAFUS, what is WAFUS? WAIFUS. I don't know that word. I'll have to look that one
It's
up.
it's like a slang term from like it's I'm looking it up right now in ChatGPT, but
I'm feeling very uncool right now that I don't
well,
know
it's
this term.
actually, I think, kind of important in this context
Okay.
because a waifu is like basically a term originating from Japanese anime, and it refers to basically like a female character you have a crush on or
Oh,
something.
okay.
It's like
Mm,
an AI. I don't know if it's strictly romantic, but
okay.
it's your AI girlfriend,
I
basically.
feel really old right now. All right. Uh, so we're on the cusp of experiences go far beyond AI waifu and well into lightly interactive entertainment territory. And then number 6 was really makes you wonder what new consumption experiences are waiting to be discovered. So again, part of the thinking of this show is to present this information because as a business leader, as a brand leader, as a marketer, we may be talking about entirely new experiences. And this is a company that was seeing significant growth and adoption that now is in partnership with Google, whatever we want to call this,
Mhm.
which not only then enables them to distribute these models more widely, but this whole multimodal concept becomes at play. And then what does that do to entertainment and communications? It's just wild. And these are the kinds of updates where you could step back and think, wow, this is probably a year from now we're going to look back and that probably should have been a main topic kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And it's so important just to, because I would argue character AI, we both know it, but people, I would pretty strongly argue, often don't think of it as this hugely popular platform and modality, oftentimes just because of generational things. We're not 18-year-olds who are using this stuff. And it really is a huge sea change in how people behave, it seems.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, next up, the former Google CEO and chairman, Eric Schmidt, has ignited some controversy with some recent comments about AI, startups, and intellectual property. So, during a talk at Stanford, Schmidt suggested that entrepreneurs could use AI to rapidly create and iterate on products, even if it means potentially infringing on existing intellectual property. He gave an example of using large language models, for instance, to create a TikTok clone. You could tell your model, he said, quote, make me a copy of TikTok, steal all the users, steal all the music, put my preferences in it, produce this program in the next 30 seconds, release it. And in 1 hour, if it's not viral, do something different along the same lines. So a pretty stunning statement about what may be possible with LLMs, but also it's kind of what he said next that really got people talking, because he advised that, say, if a product like this took off, the next step would be to, quote, hire a whole bunch of lawyers to go clean up the mess. He then added, quote, but if nobody uses your product, it doesn't matter that you stole all the content. He says, quote, Silicon Valley will run these tests and clean up the mess. And that's typically how those things are done. Now, the remarks were made during a recorded talk at Stanford, and that has since been removed from the university's YouTube channel, given the controversy around the statements. So, Paul, we talk about this issue basically in one way or another every single week, and it kind of seems like Schmidt is just saying the quiet part out loud. Like, is this really how Silicon Valley AI startups are looking at this stuff?
Yeah, and the interview is being conducted by Eric Brynjolfsson, who we previously mentioned at Stanford. Yeah, and Eric reminded Eric Schmidt at one
You're
point,
right.
"Hey,
Yeah.
like there are cameras in the room," and Schmidt like didn't seem to like register it at the time. And then there's one point in the video where he kind of realizes that there are actually cameras in the room and everything he's saying is being recorded. Uh, and I think that was the moment when that video was not long to be online. So, yeah, there are still clips of this if you wanna go get it, but the original source has definitely taken it down. Yeah, so this is one of those moments where everything we've sort of talked about on this show is validated when it comes to this stuff. We talked about NVIDIA last week, I think, in the episode, taking this stuff. We talked about Gen 3 from Runway and how they, took a bunch of copyrighted material to train their models. And yeah, he's basically just saying the quiet part out loud of like, this is what we do in Silicon Valley and the lawyers will clean it up. But everybody's doing it. So go do it. And if you're not successful, no one's going to care. If you are successful, you'll be able to afford the lawyers to do it. This is what we talked about with Grok-2. This is just take it, do it, put it out there. No one else is doing it. Well, I'm Elon Musk and we got the money. Like, just go. Like, we just raised 6 billion. We put, a billion aside for legal fees, maybe, and let's just go. So, yeah, like it or not, this is how the world of AI startups and AI frontier model companies works.
So next up, a prominent AI company called Sakana AI has unveiled what they're calling the AI Scientist, which they say is a comprehensive system for fully automated scientific discovery. Now, the platform, which is developed in collaboration with researchers from University of Oxford and the University of British Columbia, could actually mark a significant leap towards enabling AI to conduct its own research. The AI Scientist is designed to automate the entire research lifecycle. It'll generate novel ideas and then write code to execute experiments and produce full scientific manuscripts. One of the most interesting features of the AI Scientist is its automated peer review process. The company says the system can evaluate generated papers with near human accuracy, provide feedback, and even improve results. So basically, it can start building on its own work. And the company also says that each idea being developed into a full paper is very, very cost effective. It can cost just $15 to do it. Paul, this sounds exactly like what some people in the AI community have been predicting or anticipating, like AI that can do novel scientific research, which in turn leads to AI being able to advance the field of AI. Is that what we're seeing here?
So there's definitely a part of me on this one that would caution that this might be hype, more hype than reality at the moment. Doesn't mean it's not going to be possible that the research direction isn't heading in a very promising area, but I wouldn't assume that next month we're all going to have the ability to go do this kind of stuff. So my initial reaction is probably more hype than reality. That being said, this is a company that was formed in January 2024, so they're only about 8 months old. They got a $30 million initial round. The founding team includes David Ha, former Google brain, and Leon Jones, who was one of the co-creators of the Transformer, so the GPT paper. They raised another $100 million round in June, so 6 months after founding. Jeff Dean, Google's chief scientist, is one of their angel investors. So the initial reaction is, then you drill in a little bit and say, "Oh, okay, like this is interesting." So when they announced the company, they said the main focus of our research and development, new kinds of foundation models based on nature-inspired intelligence. The name Sakana is derived from the Japanese word which means fish, and then they have a logo where the school of fish is basically swimming together and forming a coherently entity, and then there's a red fish that's swimming away from everyone. And that's them. It's like this idea of like, we're going to go in a different research direction. And so they talk about evolution and collective intelligence being a key part of the research. So I don't think this changes anything in the near term for people. I think it is promising research, but I would absolutely pay attention to this company and what they do next because I think they're going to be major players based on who they've gotten funding from and who is involved in the company. And based on the trend line of the last 6 months, probably an acqui-hire by somebody in the next
Wow.
6 months.
Yeah. All right. So next up, California lawmakers have made some significant amendments to SB 1047. This is a bill we've talked about a bunch, a California Senate bill that is a bit controversial and is aimed at trying to prevent serious safety issues from AI and AI companies. The changes come in response to pressure from Silicon Valley, including some suggestions from Anthropic, and they represent a pretty significant softening of the bill's original strict rules. A couple of the changes include a reduction in government power. The California Attorney General can no longer sue AI companies for negligent safety practices before a catastrophic event has occurred. The bill no longer creates what it's called the Frontier Model Division, FMD, a new government agency. However, it does still establish the Board of Frontier Models, now expanded to 9 members, and safety requirements have been relaxed. AI labs are no longer required to submit certification safety test results under penalty of perjury. And there's a new protection for open source fine tune models. If someone spends less than $10 million fine tuning a covered model, they are explicitly not considered a developer under SB 1047. So, seems promising if you are someone who is against the extreme safety measures in the bill, but not everyone is satisfied. There's been growing calls from Congress people from California for Governor Gavin Newsom to veto the bill if it lands on his desk. And AI leaders like Jan LeCun appear to support this position, all over ostensibly fears that these rules go way too far and will stifle innovation. So, Paul, it sounds like Silicon Valley is kind of starting to throw its weight around with this bill. Like, what can we learn from this as it stands at the moment?
I mean, we've talked about this bill quite a bit, but a lot of times we're just sort of like, here's the quick update, here's the quick update, because it does seem like it's gained a lot of traction and it could be a prelude to other laws and regulations in the United States. So I'll just give a quick counter here. So a kind of letter was released. This is on August 7th, and I don't think we covered this at the time, but Four authors: Joshua Bengio, who's a Turing Award winner; Jeff Hinton, who we've talked about, former Googler, Turing Award winner also. Hinton, Bengio, and Jan LeCun actually won the Turing Award together the same year. Lawrence Lessig, who is a Harvard Law School professor and founder of Creative Commons, which I did not know. And then Stuart Russell, computer science at UC Berkeley and director of the Center for Human Compatible AI, also author of a couple of AI books we've read. So they published a letter, and I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts because this is the counterpoint stating why this should exist. So there's lots of voices like Fei Li and Andreessen Horowitz and others who are like, this is ridiculous and it's going to destroy innovation. This is the counterpoint from some of the leading minds in AI. So it says, as senior AI technical and policy researchers, we write to express our strong support for California Senate Bill 1047. Throughout our careers, we have worked to advance the field of AI and unlock its immense potential to benefit humanity. However, we are deeply concerned about severe risks posed by the next generation of AI if it is developed without sufficient care and oversight. SB 1047 outlines the bare minimum, they say, for effective regulation of this technology, doesn't have a licensing regime, doesn't require companies to receive permission from government agency before training or deploying a model. It relies on company self-assessments of risk, and it doesn't even hold companies strictly liable in the event that a catastrophe does occur. Um, they say some investors have argued that SB 1047 is unnecessary and based on science fiction scenarios. We strongly disagree. The exact nature and timing of these risks remain uncertain, as we talked about in the situational awareness episode, where we went through that report. But as some of the experts who understand these systems most, we can say confidently that these risks are probable and significant enough to make safety, testing, and common sense precautions necessary. So we'll drop the link to that letter in the show notes. You can go read it for yourself. But again, it's important to be informed on both sides. Mike and I oftentimes sit in the middle and try and understand both perspectives without offering like a strong opinion of which one we think is necessarily correct. And this is definitely one of those where I just keep taking in new information and listening to both sides and trying to see what is reasonable, but more just observing where this ends up going because I think it's going to have an effect on a lot of things. One of the big issues is this isn't just for models developed in California. This
Right.
is for models that are used in California. So it would have widespread effect. It's not just a California law that would only affect California companies.
So, in another big topic this week, there's a new study that came out that reveals kind of a bit of a striking shift in how the largest US companies perceive AI. So, according to some research from a company called Arise AI, as reported by the Financial Times, 56% of Fortune 500 companies now cite AI as a quote risk factor in their most recent annual reports. Arise AI, I believe their business is to analyze and process these types of reports. This is a huge increase because back in 2022, just 9% of companies held that view. And the perception of AI risk is pretty pronounced in certain sectors. Over 90% of media and entertainment companies and 86% of software and technology groups express concerns about AI. And companies are concerned about a range of things. These include increased competition, reputational and operational issues, ethical concerns, financial risks due to unpredictable costs and investment needs, legal and regulatory uncertainties, and cybersecurity threats. So, Paul, like we always say, you have to take every bit of research you read with a grain of salt, but pretty interesting the huge jump from the numbers this research was showing in 2022. Just 9% back then see AI as a risk factor, 56% today. Like, does that align with what you're seeing and hearing in the market?
Yeah, I just think that people are a couple years behind. So back in May of 2022, I wrote that article, "The Future of Business is AI or Obsolete," and this is the basic premise of it. That I said, with each day that passes, each advancement in artificial intelligence, language, and vision technology, is becoming more apparent that there will be three types of businesses in every industry: AI native, AI emergent, and obsolete. So I think the business world is just finally realizing that this is the future. You
Mhm.
either become AI emergent or you get disrupted. And as the AI advances, as the cost of that intelligence plummets, it becomes easier to innovate, but it also becomes easier to disrupt. And so that's a challenging position for a lot of organizations who can't move quickly as they all of a sudden see the threat that these other organizations bring. And even in that Eric Schmidt interview, one of the things that was taken down when they took the original video down is they said, how could someone like OpenAI take on Google? And he said,
Mhm.
which I think he regretted it was recorded, was they prioritized work life balance and they let people work from home. In
Mm,
essence, they lost their edge. And that's the fear that big companies have is when you get bigger, you have obligations to your employees, to your stakeholders, um, that sometimes reduce the way you ran your business before that created a lot of the innovation and drove a lot of the growth.
mhm.
And so that's the challenge here is these existing legacy companies across every industry run the risk of being disrupted because smaller, more nimble, more resource efficient companies can come up out of nowhere and just build smarter versions of the business. And it's going to happen everywhere. Law firms, HR practices, consulting firms, research firms, marketing agencies, manufacturing companies, all of them. It's a very real thing. This number should be 99%. Like every company should be worried about being disrupted right now.
All right, next up, HubSpot has released what it's calling an AI Search Grader. This is a free tool that shows you how visible your brand is in what they call AI search engines. So you type in your company name, the country you're in, type of business you are, and a quick description of your products or services. HubSpot's tool then scores your sentiment and share of voice within AI search engines. Now, the full report provided by the tool basically just breaks down for you how your company is being discussed in things like ChatGPT. So, for instance, we ran Marketing AI Institute through this. The report noted that one of the Institute's strengths was our educational value and insights, saying something like, quote, practicality is a big win for you. ChatGPT mentions that you provide actionable insights and practical advice multiple times. This includes case studies and real world examples, which are helpful for businesses looking to adopt AI. So there's a lot of insights like that in the report. It'll also break down your share of voice compared to other companies doing similar things to you. Right now, it looks like HubSpot is only analyzing ChatGPT responses, but they say they're rolling out more AI search engines and presumably including Perplexity soon enough here. So, Paul, this trying this out seems like one of the first really valuable tools or assessments that I've seen to actually help you understand how you might be appearing in AI results. Like, is this something companies should be using, thinking about using?
Yeah, I think the use case is going to expand. We've always, from an SEO perspective, you always wanted to know how you were ranking in organic search results. And now the question in the future is, how am I showing up within these language models? How am I showing up in Perplexity and ChatGPT? And then from there, the question becomes, well, how do we influence that? So if you're HubSpot and you provide marketing platform that was built on inbound marketing, which drew people to your website and pushed the idea of creating content to optimize your sites and draw people in, you would want to play in the realm of, well, what if people aren't using organic search as much and they're actually going to these models?
Right.
And so for people who aren't familiar, the way HubSpot grew so fast in the early days is Dharmesh Shah, one of the co-founders, um, created a tool called Website Grader. And it was this massive lead funnel. So they would enable you to go in, put your domain name in, and it would grade your website on these different variables that determine the strength of your website.
Mm.
So they're obviously playing on this website grader idea and trying to build the next generation of that. I just tried, I got a 404 error, so it might just be temporarily down. But it'll be interesting to see how reliable this kind of thing is. But kudos to HubSpot for another lead magnet effort.
Yeah, they got me pretty easily. But I will say, like, at least from this morning testing it, the full report I found pretty helpful and valuable. Again, you kind of need to figure out on your own what to do about what it tells you. But it was definitely not just kind of a fluffy lead magnet thing. It was pretty useful.
And as was Website Grader. Like it was a great free tool. It generated millions of leads a year for HubSpot, but it also provided immense value, which is a great lead magnet, is value creation in exchange for contacts. So that's
Yeah.
a good
And I
place.
think they did mention this morning when I was looking at it that there was really high demand for the tool. So I'm assuming that
Oh
working.
yeah, it'll blow up for
Well,
sure. They know what they're doing. I mean,
yeah.
HubSpot's a smart company.
All right. Our last topic this week is that a group of researchers from OpenAI, Microsoft, MIT, and some other major institutions has proposed a new concept called, quote, personhood credentials, PHCs, as a potential solution to the growing challenge of AI powered deception online. So basically, personhood credentials are digital certificates that would allow users to prove they are real people without revealing their identities. And the core idea is to basically balance the internet's commitment to anonymity with the need for trustworthy interactions in an era where AI can basically act as a human. So this includes two fundamental requirements. First, credential limits. Each issuer would give at most one credential to an eligible person. And then unlinkable pseudonymity. So users could interact with services anonymously through service specific pseudonyms and essentially be untraceable by the issuer and unlinkable across service providers. So they argue that basically this could really help address many key challenges, including fake accounts pretending to be distinct individuals, mitigating bot attacks, and allowing for verified delegation to AI assistants. So, Paul, this may seem a little theoretical, a little sci fi, but it does seem to be hitting on a really important need that we need to verify who is real in an era where AI can increasingly pretend to be human or be indistinguishable from humans. Is that how you're looking at this?
Yeah, this hurts my head to think about this. This is I have not read this full paper yet. This is one of those where it's just like, I mean, I know we probably need this, but this is really hard for me to accept that we need to go down this rabbit hole to like understand this at a deeper level. Um, I thought this was a Sam Altman's other company, WorldCoin is designed for, like scanning your
Right.
eyeballs to like
Yeah.
verify your personhood. Yeah, I would just say, um, unfortunately, the topic of whether or not you're an actual person is going to be relevant down the road, maybe
Yeah.
sooner than some of us, including myself, would care to admit. And that research like this is going to probably become important. And I would imagine this kind of stuff is sitting in the offices of government leaders right now, and that they're looking at big picture things. And yeah, at some point, your driver's license is just one form of verification. You may have some anonymous personhood verification as well. It's
Yeah.
a weird world we're heading into.
Well, interesting. The shorter term, too, I found the point about verified delegation to AI assistants interesting. Like we've talked about, we're already seeing people's AI note takers showing up to meetings. We're
Yeah.
not that many steps away from realizing that we could have total AI stand in for the CEO or someone, but how do I know that's real or yours? Lots of challenges.
Yeah, that goes back to that Zoom, the episode we were talking about, the CEO of
Yeah.
Zoom. And
Yeah.
by the way, like, just a heads up, if we ever like, if you're a listener and we ever have a Zoom meeting and you send your avatar instead of you to a meeting, we will never do business again. Like, I I feel like we're gonna have to have these conversations at some point in the future. Like, yeah, you can send your note taker or your avatar. Like, you may have that capability 1, 2, 3 years out, but
Mhm.
we're gonna have to like have a conversation around business etiquette when your
Right.
AI can go somewhere instead of you. And me personally, like I don't want to do business with someone's avatar 2 years from now. So just like I'm just setting that seed now.
It's like if
Uh,
you can't attend the meeting, why are we having the meeting as well?
yeah, yeah. I could just I there's
That's
gonna
the
be an article in the New York Times like 2, 3 years from now about like a job seeker who sent their avatar for the interview, and like it's just gonna happen. Like it's inevitable.
whole.
Ugh.
All right. Well, that is a very packed week in AI, Paul. I appreciate you breaking everything down for us. Just a quick couple reminders for everyone. As always, go check out our newsletter, marketingaiinstitute.com/newsletter. This is all the news that we have been covering this week in AI, including plenty of stuff that's not in today's podcast episode. And also, if you can, if your platform allows you to, please leave us some type of review if you have not already. All the feedback is really taken into account to try to make this show as good as possible. And feedback and reviews help us get this into the earphones of more people. So we'd love if you took a minute to do that. Paul, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Safe travels. Enjoy the event. We'll catch up with you soon. And thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for listening to the AI Show. Visit marketingaiinstitute.com to continue your AI learning journey and join more than 60,000 professionals and business leaders who have subscribed to the weekly newsletter, downloaded the AI blueprints, attended virtual and in-person events, taken our online AI courses, and engaged in the Slack community. Until next time, stay curious and explore AI.